What time is it? 7:27, starting a little bit early. Nothing wrong with that, right? My name is Vocab Malone. This is the show where we serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. I'm your host, Vocab Malone. And we're trying some new things tonight. Hopefully they work. You know how technology can be. Sometimes it's our friend, sometimes not so much. But on Street Apologist Live, you know, we're a Christian show, we're an apologetic show. We specialize in talking about alternative urban spiritualities, such as Hebrew Israelism. We haven't covered Old Testament or Tanakh only Hebrew Israelism as much on this channel, but today we are, because recently San Miguel and we did a show about the House of YisraEL in Cincinnati, one of my favorite cities in America, no joke. Gotta like Columbus, gotta like Phoenix, but Cincinnati is right up there, probably my top 5 cities. Love that place. And so what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to be having Moreh IshiYAH Ben Israel and also YisraEL. And they're going to join me live to set the record straight. In their words, they're going to set the crooked thing straight. Because we recently did this video and they believe that they want to present their side of the issues that I covered, such as the history of the House of YisraEL in Cincinnati, and especially their views on violence regarding Hebrew Israelism in the city as well. So I look forward to good dialogue, a good interview. And shout out to Dinu and Paul Wahid as we get started. Let's go. All right. Well, we are good. You guys can be seen. We already did our mic check. I think everything's in order. I'm going to let you gentlemen introduce yourselves to the audience. And I appreciate your time and coming on the show and reaching out to me and being willing to give a different perspective to the audience tonight. So thanks for joining. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you again to our host. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to come on your show, not only to introduce ourselves to your listeners and to yourself, but we also greatly appreciate the opportunity to respond to the video that went out to us about the House of Israel of Cincinnati, Ohio. Of course, I am the senior Moreh and spiritual leader here at the House of Israel of Cincinnati, Ohio, 2330 Kemper Lane in Cincinnati, Ohio, located in a town called Walnut Hills. There's many groups here in Cincinnati, 4 in particular that are Torah-based only Israelites, which means we all believe in the Old Testament. And I think I said, praise the mighty God, did I? Before I introduce myself, I'd first like to say, giving all praise and honor to the Holy One of Israel, the creator of the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that is therein, by saying hallelujah. And also, I have here one of my assistants, Moreh IshiYAH, also, who take care of all our technical information and allows us to be able to broadcast all over the world. And you can introduce yourself, IshiYAH.
Shalom, praise the mighty Yah. I'm Moreh IshiYAH YisraEL from the House of YisraEL of Cincinnati, and it's an honor to be on your program. Hallelujah.
Thank you. And you guys were saying that in the beginning, maybe 5 minutes or however long you needed to really just explain to everybody exactly what it is you teach so that we can all understand better.
Very good. I appreciate that question. We teach that we are the children of Israel, part of the house of Israel that is written in the Bible. We teach the Old Testament of the Bible, which is Genesis through Malachi. And we teach that we must keep the commandments, the laws, the statutes, and the judgments of our Creator. And although many religions have attached themselves to the house of Israel, we don't teach any religion beliefs whatsoever. We believe totally and exclusively in keeping the commandments, the laws, statutes, and judgments, as well as the covenants of the Most High. And again, we challenge your listeners and yourself to challenge us on our beliefs. And while we don't adhere to any religion on earth, so we're not attached to any Judaism, any Christianity, any Islamic teachings, or any ism at all. Only the scriptures and only the law. And this is what we teach here in Cincinnati.
Anything else you want to say about your
Yes.
beliefs?
Yes, let me say this also. We know there's many religions probably in your listening audience, and the things that we might say, it's not meant to offend you at all because we love our brothers and sisters. It's only meant to tell you our truth according to the scriptures. And as I stated before, in the scriptures, the Old Testament of the Bible, it is where you will find the unadulterated word of the Most High. In other words, you will see him speak in the Holy Scriptures, or what you know of as the Old Testament. No other book is designed that way. No other book will you find the Creator speaking to anyone, period. Not even Christ. The only book that is written where you will find the voice and the word of Yahweh is in the Old Testament. And we've studied these books. We looked at these books, and they're void of his word. And this is why we do not practice the various religions that many in the world practice today. And the Old Testament, I may add, is not just a book for Israelites. If anyone desired to be saved in the world, and I don't care who they are or what sin they have committed, the Creator has a program for everyone to be saved. So there's no one that needs to believe that they are doomed. And I will prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt if I'm asked that.
So one thing, Moreh IshiYAH, that you want people to understand of what you just said, I heard a number of things, maybe two main things, is that we view the Torah alone, as a source of Yahweh's revelation. And then secondly, that we at the House of YisraEL are not in a group who excludes those that might be called other nations. There is a way for them to come in some way and experience salvation. Did I get those two things right, or do you want to tweak those?
No, you get those things absolutely correct.
So to the audience who is somewhat familiar with Hebrew Israelism, not claiming we're experts or anything like that, we're all students. There's always a lot to learn. Even though there's some things we know, as we talked about briefly, some of this is also new. We haven't dealt with as much or interacted as much with Torah-only groups. Sometimes individuals as well. And sometimes, when we deal with one-Westers, I understand that's not you, and I want everyone to understand these guys, you don't want to associate them with one-Westers for at least those two reasons. Those are distinctives. Torah only, hear that, everybody, and other nations can be included. Now, do you want, unless there's something else you want to specifically say, I'd love you to be able to follow up on what you mean by a program of salvation for deliverance, regardless of the person, especially what you mean by salvation and what you mean by deliverance, like how you understand those things. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, that's good. And I'm prepared to share that with you. In the
Okay.
scriptures, we believe in all, as I stated before, we believe in the law. We believe in the writings of the scriptures, and we believe in the prophets. The prophets teach us in the book of Isaiah 56, and I'd like to share that with you real quick.
Yes, sir.
In the book of Isaiah 56, and I'll just share one more scripture on the questions that's asked me for other people other than an Israelite, how they can be saved and how they can have salvation. And this is what it says in Isaiah 56 and 1. Thus says Yahweh, keep you judgment and do justice. For my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that does this, the son of man that lays hold on it, that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Neither let the son of the stranger, and that's anyone other than Israel, that has joined himself to Yahweh, speak, saying, Yahweh has utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. For thus says Yahweh, unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant, even unto them will I give in my house, and within my walls a place and a name better than the sons and other daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also the sons of the strangers that join themselves to Yahweh, to serve him, to love the name of Yahweh, to be his servants. Everyone that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it and takes hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings, their sacrifices shall be accepted upon my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. And then the one other scripture that I would like to read is in the book of Numbers, the 15th chapter. And this is what it says, as soon as I grab it.
Numbers, what chapter?
Numbers 15.
Numbers chapter 15.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. So we just read from Isaiah
56.
56. Now we're going to read from Numbers chapter 15. If you have your Bibles electronically or paper, and want everyone to know that this be broadcasted on a few different platforms. We're on Facebook Live in two different places on Facebook. We're also, for the first time, on StreetApaw, just live on YouTube. And I believe House of YisraEL is also broadcasting this from their YouTube channel. And I just wanted to let everyone know that. And I believe we should be on Twitter too, I think. I think that's all the places we are today, unless I'm missing one. But okay, I'm here. I'm here if you're there.
Yes, Numbers 15, and I'll just read start at the 14th verse. And it says, and if a stranger sojourns with you, or whoever is among you in your generations, and will offer an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Yahweh, as you do, so he shall do. One ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation, and also the stranger that sojourns with you, an ordinance forever in your generations, as you are. So shall the stranger be before Yahweh. One law, one manner shall be for you and for the stranger that sojourns with you. So according to the word of the Most High, and I said Yahweh has a program for other people other than Israel that they can have salvation also. And the program is called the law. The program is called his covenant. The program is called his Sabbaths. And if they join themselves unto the Most High by keeping his Sabbaths, by entering into a covenant with him, as Israel is, so shall the stranger be also. And so this is a way where other people can also be saved by the Most High.
All right. So, Isaiah 56 and the passage you just read in Numbers 15, those are sometimes passages we bring up to our One West friends, with the exception of GOCC, to show them something similar. And it's interesting. So with our One West friends, although they're not very friendly to us sometimes, but with our One West friends, we hypothetically agree that Yeshua, or they would call him YisraEL, Yeshua is Mashiach, or the Messiah. Now with you, that's something that we're not agreeing on. You would not agree that Yeshua is a Messiah, but would agree about strangers being able to, even in the Old Covenant, which you would describe as a Torah, even in the Old Covenant, being able to be joined to Israel in some way. You're not necessarily Torah only? Are you Tanakh only? The whole Tanakh?
Yes,
Because you read from Isaiah.
Yes, the whole Tanakh.
Okay, yeah.
We're not practitioners of the Judaism. We believe in the whole Tanakh, and the prophets are a part of law. So everything they tell us, as that's law to us, because the Almighty said we're supposed to go by everything they tell him. He sent the prophets to return us back to him. And so the prophets are as important to us as the law is, because they sent us to teach us the law. And yes,
so when you say Torah, you include in Torah the larger works of the Tanakh, Judges, Ruth, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all that.
That's correct. The book of Esther, as well as many of the other books, Kings, Chronicles as well, the book of Samuel. Yes.
Okay, so that's important for everyone to understand, because I think at one point when I said Torah, only people may have understood that as first 5 books of Moses, but understand, I think the way we look at it is being Tanakh only. But based on something you just said, Moreh, it sounds like you would reject the Midrash and you would reject the Talmud. Am I right about that?
That is correct. Any other book. And yes, those books are included.
So rejection of the New Testament, rejection, of course, I guess the Kabbalah, but just in English, 39 books. I know it's not the same count when you do it in Hebrew, but the 39 books as far as in the English canon. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. So we don't practice the Hadiths or the Quran or any other religious book or any other religion, period. That is correct.
Now, I think that's a good start, so people will understand where the house of YisraEL is at. A couple people do have questions in regards to the Messiah. Justin Lee Chambers is in here. He has a question about that. So I know that you would say it is not the one you guys call Yeshua. Could you share your views so we understand, though, what do you think about the Messiah? I've heard some, I'm not saying you, I've heard some Tanakh only Israelites say it was actually Joshua. And I've heard others say he's still forthcoming. But could you share what you believe is the best stance to have in regards to the Messiah or Messiahs, depending on how you break it down?
Yes, and I appreciate that question also. And right before I showed you just a couple of scriptures about who we believe is the Messiah. Of course, the word Messiah is a Greek word, but it just means the anointed one, the future king. And there is a future king that the Creator speaks about. But I just want to share with you why we do not, of course, we're not practitioners of the New Testament. So that states everything by itself. However, but why? In the book of Deuteronomy, the 24th chapter, the 16th verse, it reads, it says, the father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. So regardless if you call yourself an Israelite, a Christian, or anything, when you practice the New Testament, you also believe someone died for your sins. And according to our law, no man can be put to death for any man's sin. Every man is put to death for his own sin. You also find this in the book of Ezekiel, the 18th chapter, the 20th verse. Just another reference point. And then also in the book of Isaiah, the 43rd chapter, just read that real quick. And this is what it says in the 10th verse. You are my witnesses, said Yahweh, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me there was no Elohim formed, neither shall there be after me. I am Yahweh, and besides me there is no Savior. So the Creator made it crystal clear all through the Holy Scriptures that he was the only Savior, and no man can die for another man's sins. Now, who is this Messiah that is stated by the Most High by name? And see, with us, you don't have to guess. The name is stated out of the mouth of the Creator. And I'll read that name to you in the book of Ezekiel, the 37th chapter. And this is what it says in Ezekiel 37. Let me get it. Speaking of the future Messiah. And this
Ezekiel 37.
Ezekiel 37 is one of the many places, and I may add, this person I'm about to read about is already dead. And they talk about someone coming back, and let me show you who Yahweh said will come back. First in Ezekiel 37, and the only other place I'll show you is Jeremiah 30, although it's all over the Holy Scriptures. But in Ezekiel 37, and I'll read starting at the 21st verse. And this is how you know it's future. And say unto them, thus says Yahweh, behold, I will take the children from among the heathen wherever they have gone, and will gather them over on every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. And they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will save them out of all their dwelling places wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them. So shall they be my people, and I will be their Elohim. And David, my servant, shall be king over them, and they all shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given unto Yaakov, or Jacob, my servant, wherein your fathers have dwelt. And they shall dwell therein, even they, and their children, and their children's children forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever. And so here the Creator is letting us know his anointed one, his Messiah, is none other than King David. And at this time, King David been dead. But the Creator talked about bringing King David back. Not his son, not his grandson, but David himself. And you'll also read this in the book of Jeremiah, the 30th chapter. And I'll just read that just for reference points. But as I said, it's all over the Holy Scriptures. In the book of Jeremiah 30, and this is what it says. Not only it said there he will be king, he will be prince forever, but in the book of Jeremiah 30, and you only can have one king at a time. Yahweh's king of heaven, David will be king on earth. And this is what it says. In Jeremiah 30, verse 8. And it says, I'll start at verse 7. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Yaakov's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day, said Yahweh of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off your neck, and will burst your bonds, and strangers shall no more serve themselves of him, but they shall serve Yahweh their Elohim, and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. So the Creator talked about David in Jeremiah, in Ezekiel, as well as in Micah, and many of the books that we know of today as prophets. And he was prophesied to return, to be raised up amongst his own people, to rule, to be king of the whole earth.
So would you think, Moreh IshiYAH, that explanation answers, for example, Psalm 16, 8 through 11, in regards to David? It says, I saw Yahweh always before me, for he is at my right hand that I may not be shaken. Therefore my heart was glad and my tongue rejoiced. My flesh will also dwell in hope. For you will not abandon my soul to Hades, or let your Holy One see corruption. You have made known to me the path of life. You make me full of gladness with your presence. So just like Peter said to the Israelites of his day, he said, well, Patriarch David, he's died. He's buried. His tomb's right over there. And so because of that, that would eliminate David as being the Messiah being prophesied of here. Or do you have an alternative explanation?
Well,
Specific,
yeah, in
Psalm
Psalm
18.
16, yeah,
I'm sorry, Psalm 16, I said. Psalm 16, sorry. Psalm
Yeah.
16, especially verse 20. Especially verse 10, especially. Psalm 16, 10, especially.
well, let me get there to Psalm 16 and 10 because I was not there when you was reading it, and I'll read the 10th
Yeah,
verse again, but I already know the verse, and it says, for you will not leave my soul in hell, neither will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. In other words, this when most people die, they do see corruption. And David is saying, you're not going to leave me destroyed in the grave. The word hell just come from the Hebrew word sheol, which means grave. And so at some point in time, the Almighty had already took David with him. And so when in the book of Jeremiah, the 30th chapter, it literally says that he was going to raise David up to be king forever. That's what it says in Jeremiah 30, verse 8 and 9. And then it also lets you know he only have one Messiah. And you'll read about this in the book of Psalms 89, if I may read that. Psalms 89. And watch what this says.
So it seems you're saying you think that Psalm 16, verse 10, speaks of a future resurrection of David.
That is, in other words, David himself is letting us know, letting the readers know that the Almighty will not leave him in hell. He already knew that he will come back even after his death. And there's many songs. You read Psalms 49, he's saying the same exact thing. And we can take time to read that as well, if you don't mind. But in Psalms 89, this is what it says in the 19th verse. Psalms 89. In many of these songs, 72 different songs was written by David. Now, they will attribute a lot of songs to David that he didn't write. His servants wrote them. Other people wrote them. But 72 of them was written by David. So many of the things he spoke in the first person, and then many of the things that's written in the book of Psalms is written about him. This is one in the book of Psalms 89. And this is what it says in the 19th verse. Then you spoke in a vision to your Holy One and said, I have laid help upon one that is mighty. I have exalted one chosen out of the people. I have found David, my servant. With my holy oil have I anointed him, with whom my hand shall be established. My arm also shall strengthen him. The enemy shall not exact upon him, nor the son of wickedness afflict him. I will beat down his foes before his face and plague them that hate him. But my faithfulness and my mercy shall be with him, and in my name shall his horn be exalted. I will set his hand also in the sea, and his right hand in the rivers. He shall cry unto me, you are my Father, my Elohim, and the rock of my salvation. Also, I will make him my firstborn higher than the kings of the earth. And of course, this is exactly what the Creator not only did part of this while he was living, but will establish this whole government in the future.
Moreh IshiYAH, in the psalm that you're in, Psalm 89, what do you think of verse 4, where it says, I will establish your offspring forever? Who do you think that's referring to?
That's speaking of David. In other words, the Almighty said he was going to establish David offspring. Later on in this chapter, it said, even though they will sin against me, I will punish them with stripes, but his seed will last forever.
So
That is
wouldn't
true.
his seed need to be one of his offspring, though?
Say that again.
Wouldn't his seed need to be one of his offspring, though?
Yeah, but it never talks about his seed being king. The only one that it talked about being king forever, the only one talked about being a prince forever, the only one talked about being a shepherd forever is David. None of his seed is talked about being forever, only with conditions. And all the seed of David, every last single one, from Solomon on, they all sin. This is why we're in captivity today. But he
Well,
said,
yeah, including, of course, David himself. But Psalm 89:4 does say the offspring will be on the throne, because I will establish your offspring forever. And then there's the Hebrew parallelism there, because right after that line it says, and build your throne for all generations. Those two things are connected. And I think the reader's supposed to ponder that. That's why it says Selah, that pause.
I agree with that. Of course, there's no throne of David right now.
Right, but there is, if Christ or a Messiah is an offspring of David and he reigns forever, then this could actually be fulfilled, right?
If, and I would say yes, if Yahweh did not tell us that he was going to raise David up. See, that's part you ignoring. We just read that in the book of Jeremiah, the 30th chapter, verse 8 and 9. And we also ignoring the fact that in Ezekiel 37, he said David. See, he didn't have to say David. He could have said the seed of David, the offspring of David, the offshoot of David. But he said David will be king forever. And the throne is named after David. And not only he said that, he said he only got one shepherd. And that one shepherd is David. You'll read this in the book of Ezekiel, the 34th chapter. Can I read that?
Yeah, while you're going there, in regards to, earlier I asked you about Psalm where it says, you won't let your Holy One see corruption. You won't leave me abandoned in Sheol. And of course, we would say, hey, look, well, David's dead. He's right over there. But if you have a resurrection from the dead, then that would actually fulfill it. That's why it couldn't be David. You're saying it's a future resurrection of David, but I would wonder, wouldn't that be the case for all faithful Israelites, that they'll be risen again? Because like Daniel 12:1 and 2 says, at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So certainly David will experience the resurrection on the last day, but so will Daniel, so will Shadrach, Meshach. I know those are not their Hebrew names,
Yes,
everyone. But I'm saying, wouldn't that apply to all faithful Israelites? They'll all be risen up on the last day, not just David. So that's why it seems like that verse would eliminate David, because he did experience corruption in regards to his flesh. He died. He was not risen again. He will be risen again, but so will all faithful Israelites. So it's not really exclusive to David.
Yeah, the only
I,
you're absolutely correct that all faithful Israelites will return, will come back. The difference between David and other Israelites is David will return as king. David will return as the only prince. David will return as the only shepherd. And that's the difference between David and other Israelites. Yah could have made anybody a king. And he never mentioned Christ as being king. He never mentioned Christ as being shepherd. He never mentioned his name at all. Not
well,
Yash.
Micah 5.
Let me
Micah
just
5,
say this
2.
real quick. Not as Yahshua, not as Yahawashah, not as Christ, Jesus, or any other name. No time did the Creator mention his name, not even one time. And I'm showing you what the Creator himself said out of his mouth. And such as, and I'll read this and then maybe you can show me otherwise. But in the book of Ezekiel 34, this is what the Creator said about David. And you're right. During the time of Ezekiel, David had been gone. He's been dead. But the Creator still said this in spite of David's death. And he said in the book of Ezekiel, the 34th chapter, the 19th verse. And as for my flock, they eat that which you have trodden with your feet, and they drink that which you have filed with your feet. Therefore, thus says Yahweh to them. In other words, this is not thus said an angel, or thus said Ezekiel, or thus says anyone else. This is thus says Yahweh. In your book, it might say, Lord thy God. But it's still God speaking. Behold, I will judge between the fat cattle and between the lean cattle, because you have thrust with side and with shoulder, and pushed all the disease with your horns till you have scattered them abroad. Therefore will I save my flock, and they shall no more be a prey. And I will judge between cattle and cattle, and I will set up one shepherd over them, and he shall feed them. Even my servant David, he shall feed them, and he shall be their shepherd. And I, Yahweh, will be their God. My servant David, a prince among them, I, Yahweh, have spoken it. And I'm saying, anyone that speak anything else, they not speaking against me. They speaking against the Most High, because he the one spoke this.
Right. I'll mention one other thing, and then if you want to respond, and then maybe hopefully we can move on to some of the other elements we wanted to discuss.
Yes,
to
sir.
the people joining, I'm speaking with Moreh IshiYAH and Moreh IshiYAH YisraEL, both from the House of YisraEL, Cincinnati. I recently, with Sam Miguel, did a live stream, partially about their congregation there. They said, hey, I'd like to respond to it. I said, okay. In the beginning, they wanted to explain what they taught, so they did a little bit about that. I'm asking a few questions in regards to the Messiah, but we're going to move on in a second here. We're going to talk a little bit more. I'm just letting everyone know, because I see a couple of people saying, hey, what exactly is going on? And so just trying to catch everybody up. But now you had said, he wasn't called shepherd, and I mentioned Micah 5. And if I could read that, and I'd love to hear your reaction to this, verses 2 through 5. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel. So there, of course, is that kingship language. Whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days. That's important. I think there's something in there I would like to point out once after I read these next couple verses. Therefore he shall give them up until the time when she who is in labor has given birth. Then the rest of his brothers shall return to the people of Israel, and he shall stand and shepherd his flock. So this king is also described as a shepherd, in the strength of Yahweh, or of the Lord, as the translations sometimes say, and the majesty of the name of Yahweh, his Elohim, or Lord is God, as sometimes the translations say. And they shall dwell secure, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth. and he shall be their peace. So that last line is important because Yahweh in the Tanakh is described really as a sole source of peace for Israel and all peoples. This is one reason that I think it makes sense to say, this doesn't just sound like this is David, but a Davidic type ruler. Of course, they're born in the same place, and that's why there was expectation during Second Temple Judaism, the first century, that there would be perhaps a Messiah, and if he was born, he would be born in that place. But if you look, what's very interesting is 5:2, this phrase, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Because someone might say, well, that's just an old lineage. David has an old lineage, that kind of idea. But this phrase here, Mikadim, can refer to eternity past. I'll specifically give you the examples of Psalm 74:12, Habakkuk 1:12. And so this time-related expression that we see, Ancient of Days, or in Hebrew, Meme Olam, refers to also going way back, ancient. And so when you see Ancient of Days, when you see from of old, and then when you see origins, which is matzah, coming out, you see those things, and that seems to predict a divine origin for the Messiah. I've never heard in the Tanakh King David described in these ways. I've heard him described as a shepherd, as a king. We would agree on that. But I've never heard David described as a source of peace for Israel, like Micah 5:5 says. And I've definitely never heard David described as having ancient origins from of old, from ancient days. And so within that, the reason I brought that up is because you said this other Messiah you guys are talking about, meaning, like us guys, he's not described as a shepherd or a king. Well, in Micah 5:2-5, he is. But you would still say this is David, I imagine. Is that correct? You'd still say this describes David, even though it says coming forth from of old, from ancient days, and described as their peace?
Yes, I would say that's David. And of course, I know you would say otherwise. That's why the first thing I did was went to places that absolutely said David. And see, anyone can look at this and interpret it two different ways. But how can you interpret different when the Creator himself said David will be king? David will be raised up. David will be the one shepherd. David will be the one mighty one, the one anointed. And you talked about the divinity or the divineness of someone returning or coming back, or the divinity of an individual that may or may not be a man. Yes, it talks about David in that way as well. The scriptures say David was a man after Yahweh's heart. And I don't know how closer you can get to the Most High than a man after his own heart. And so this is what David was. But let me show you a scripture in the book of Zechariah that talked about this David that we're speaking about now. In the book of Zechariah, the 14th chapter, I think it is, and we're just going to read this about David. And I'm going to read the
Zechariah 14, everyone. And notice, everyone, we're having this
It's the
interview,
12th
we're having
chapter.
this discussion.
Yeah,
but
Zechariah,
notice
the
that
12th chapter. 12th chapter.
we're able to
Zechariah.
discuss Zechariah 12, actually,
Yes.
everybody. Notice we're able to discuss these things, and clearly we don't agree. But notice, no one has to call anyone names. No one has to say anything disrespectful. No one has to insult anyone. No one has to, you guys notice this? Even though this is an interview discussion, during this part, we're disagreeing, but notice that it doesn't have to be wild. And so I think that's a good, healthy example of what dialogue could be. And I would like to hopefully see Christians and groups that are associated with Hebrew Israelites, hopefully both sides, I'm saying, model things like this more, hopefully. So go ahead, and this will be the last part, and then we'll move on to some of the history and things in regards to the last broadcast. Go ahead. I'll let you have the last word, though.
Very good. And I also agree 100% with you that this is how dialogue should be with brethren. And we don't have to have this animosity and hate and vile and problems with each other. All we have to do is just state our beliefs, and if we don't agree, then we still love each other. But one day we will. One day the crooked things will be made straight. And that's the work of the Most High. But in the book of Zechariah, the 12th chapter, this is what it says in the 7th verse. Yahweh also shall say the tents of Judah first. Judah, as well as the other tribes of Israel, are scattered all over the earth today. The original tribes, not some religious tribes, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day, Yahweh shall defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David. And David was this strong warrior during his lifetime. Then it says, and the house of David shall be as God, or Elohim, as the angel of Yahweh before them. And so what I'm saying is, this divine person that you're looking for, I'm saying is David himself. And the Creator talked about bringing him back by name, not his son, not his offshoot, not his nephew, but him himself, all over the scriptures. And so this is the Messiah, not that I just believe in, but it's the Messiah that Yahweh himself spoken.
All right. Thank you for that. Now, that was a good exchange, but let's move on to perhaps something more contentious. Doesn't mean that obviously it has to be crazy, but I know that you said there were some things in the live stream I did on the young man who had choked and punched a woman and then shot at her feet, and apparently a year early shot at two other people in a car. In that discussion, I discussed House of YisraEL and read a few things related to that, even going back to Hananiah YisraEL. I know within that context, you said there were some things that you found offensive or took umbrage at or disagreed with strongly. And if you could share what those are, I think we set a good platform, so a good stage so far, and to be able to say what those things are and why it is you disagree, and we'll hear you out.
Oh, no, and I appreciate that once again for the opportunity for us to talk with you about this. Of course, the caption was the House of Israel of Cincinnati, the violence in the House of Israel of Cincinnati. And so it was alleged that this violence that one of our brothers here in Cincinnati was committing or alleged to have committed, he got that from the House of Israel of Cincinnati, not from his family, not from his upbringing, not from public school that he might have been in or any other institution that he might have been a part of, but yet it was alleged that he got it from the House of Israel of Cincinnati. Likewise, with the founding people here in Cincinnati, you spoke of Hananiah. Of course, there was a man named Reginald Cheneau who killed Martin Luther King's mother. And he never said the House of Israel inspired him. He never said Hananiah inspired him. He said he had a vision from God. And that's why he did what he did. And our teachers at the time, one in particular, my specific teacher, Moreh IshiYAH Will, who founded the House of Israel in 1967, if I'm correct, in 1968, who I was a student under, he spoke about this in an interview in 1972, not only condemning the killing, but also told us and many others how this couldn't have been from the Most High. So this was nothing that the house of Israel supported at all. Although Reginald Chenault was a part of the house of Israel, as well as Elijah Israel was part of the house. He was not an active member of the house of Israel of Cincinnati during these alleged things that was said about him. We don't know if they're true or not because he hadn't even been to trial yet. But nevertheless, he still is not an active member of the house of Israel. But even if he was, it was alleged that this came from us and our teachings. And I think that was dishonest when you don't know where he got his philosophy in killing from. But we know it didn't come from the house of Israel, Cincinnati.
So Hananiah Israel, you don't feel had any role in what Chenault did. You're saying that because Chenault seemed to indicate that Hananiah was saying basically there couldn't be progress amongst the community until the ministers were out of the way.
Well,
But you're saying,
and I'm saying, if this was true, you honestly believe that Chenault would be the only person that went out and tried to kill pastors, Christian pastors, and other pastors? And do you honestly believe that there hadn't been no Israelite trying to kill, not from Cincinnati, trying to kill any pastors? In other words, if he was that influential to have one person do it, why not two? Why not three? Why not a group, as done in other religions, like Christianity, like Islam? And so, but he himself said he had a vision from the Most High. And we know this is not the way of the Most High. The Most High never inspired an individual to go blow up a building, never go to kill someone, but just the opposite. The Creator gave visions to prophets to warn the people about him, to let them know that they were committing things against him. And so Yahweh was an Elohim, a God that warned people. And no, I don't believe Hananiah, even though I never met Hananiah, inspired him. And why do I believe that? Because my teacher, who was under Hananiah, Moreh IshiYAH Will, said he didn't. And he was there. And none of them, what Hananiah did teach, he let our people know who they were, that they were Israelites, and that the people of the Bible were black. And this was some of the main teachings during that era and during that time. And that's why, like I said, if you had 2 and 3 and 4 people propping up, trying to kill people, saying they was inspired by the teachers to kill people and to hurt people, then you might have a point. But this Lone Ranger that is in history, he don't represent the teachings of our founding brothers here in Cincinnati.
would you view Hananiah Israel as the founder of House of Israel?
Well, he's the one, he was the one who brought this teaching to Cincinnati through the way of Chicago. And he inspired many people here in Cincinnati to learn and to know self. And when they began to exercise their own mind to learn the scriptures, and Hananiah was very, very versed in the scriptures from what I hear, he inspired a lot of Israelites. And a great community came out of his teachings. As I stated before, my teacher did. And my teacher, Moreh IshiYAH Will, his videos have went all over the world. His videos are all on YouTube. And you can research his videos. And not one person was inspired to go kill anybody from his teachings, not an Israelite, because this is not what they teach. They taught the truth. They taught how the Creator hated oppression, hated violence, hated hatred, except for evil. The Almighty teaches us to hate evil. But there's not one individual in the scriptures that Yahweh told us to hate. Not one individual.
So in July 8th, 1974, the New York Times had an article that was Chenault's Road to Atlanta in Tragedy. This was on a Monday. And then it follows up. It continues on another page, paved by a bizarre interpretation of the Bible. And I'll read what is here, and then you can respond to it. Here's what it says here, under a section called The Real Truth. Apparently, Mr. Chenault's exposure to the philosophy of Mr. Israel was crucial. Mr. Israel, a 70-year-old recluse and self-taught theologian who lives in a two-room apartment in the predominantly black Avondale section of Cincinnati, set out to persuade a small group of young blacks that black ministers were the enemy of black people, getting rich off the community. This, the young men were told, was the real truth. Mr. Israel taught that blacks were a lost tribe of Israelites, enslaved by whites and misled by the Christian teachings of black ministers, that only the death of all black ministers would make blacks free. So you're saying Hananiah Israel did not teach that? Or he said that, but then he didn't tell people to kill them? Are they describing his teaching wrong? Do you know for sure if they are? Because, hey, I'm not claiming New York Times is God's word. I'm just saying, is that an accurate or an inaccurate description of what he taught?
Well, as I stated before, I never was under the teachings of Hananiah Israel. Only learned about him just like you, and that's second and third handed. And but first-hand knowledge of his teachings came from my teacher, who was under Hananiah, who became also one of his teachers. And I'm saying this is nothing that my teacher, Moreh IshiYAH, described about Hananiah, and there's nothing that he taught. But he talked about the case of Reginald Chenault, and to be quite frank and honest, he just said he was a lunatic. Now, as I stated before, if you had another example of someone claiming that Hananiah told them to kill black pastors, to hurt black pastors, and to do anything to black pastors, Christian pastors, or anything like that, then I can see a pattern. But just to go by one person, I know you're not doing that, and because this was reported in the New York Times, but this is something that they will do anyway. Oftentimes, they will make black organizations, whether they religious or not, they will make us the enemy, and they will make us bad and hate groups, such as the Black Panthers and SELC. These are mostly Christian organizations, but they will make them bad. And if something bad happened, then they will highlight the bad, but they wouldn't talk about nothing good. And so they talked about this one particular situation, and then they put it all on Elder Hananiah, Moreh Hananiah. And I'm saying this is not the person that I heard about through my teacher. Yes.
Now, we don't have a disagreement about a tendency of the press to do exactly what you're saying. I think even probably more so explicitly then. I'm not saying they don't do it anymore, just sometimes it's sometimes less explicit. So I don't disagree with that. I'm just trying to get at what's what, because then it describes some other gentlemen from Dayton. Now, they may have only been connected to Chenault. This is where there's gaps in the information, but I'll read this other section and see your response to this. Here's what it says. Because, I mean, it is a pretty big thing about what happened. I mean, that's a big deal to go into Ebenezer. She's playing the organ, shoot. I mean, it's going to get some attention, but at the same time, I understand what you're saying. So here's what the other part of the article says. Other members of the group explained in interviews that when Mr. Chenault killed Mrs. King, he was carrying out an order of, quote, the Most High. Walter E. Brooks, a tall, thin, former schoolmate in Mr. Chenault at Ohio State, became the pupil of Mr. Chenault and is now teaching the truth to several other young men in Dayton. According to the philosophy, Mr. Chenault was not responsible for the death of Mrs. King because the act was not his choice, but was preordained 2,000 years ago, as was everything that happens today. Mr. Brooks said that Mr. Chenault's task was incomplete because, quote, there were 10 names on that list, end quote. He said it was the will of the, quote, Most High, end quote, and that the task be completed and that, quote, agents of the Most High, end quote, would be called upon to do it. He uses his children to do his work, Mr. Brooks remarked. Every man with reverend in front of his name is in trouble. God is going to kill them all. They are already marked. It was planned 2,000 years ago. And then it's strange that he said that and followed it up with this, but we are nonviolent. We are the most peaceful people on earth. That was, to me, that seemed to it's a strange thing to say after what he said. But do you know anything about Walter Brooks, for example, or the men in Dayton? Are those men not associated with Hananiah? They were only associated with perhaps Chenault. Do you know anything about that? Because it seems it was spread past Chenault, is I guess what I'm saying, at least by some of the quotes I read here.
Yes, and I'll let after I respond, I'll let Moreh IshiYAH talk about it a little bit. However, it sounds like a contradiction to me about killing people and then saying we're not violent. That's a contradiction. And again, I think because I don't know the gentleman that you speak of,
Right.
but my first hand knowledge of Hananiah and his teachings, once again, was from a teacher who was one of his closest confidants, a teacher of his, and someone that was with him before many of these people that you're speaking about. So Moreh IshiYAH was one of his first students, and one that he trained more than anyone else, that went on to teach after Hananiah died, during the time that Hananiah lived, and at the time, we only had one Israelite congregation in Cincinnati. It wasn't until after the death of Moreh IshiYAH Israel where people began to split away. But during his life, there was only one Israelite congregation in Cincinnati at the time, and this was Hananiah's closest confidant, and he never said one negative thing about him whatsoever. Their disagreement on the scriptures was a disagreement of doctrine, but he was like a son to Hananiah, and so they respected and loved each other until his death. And so these things I'm hearing about with Chenault, and this is the main thing that we want to know about his vision that he had to kill black pastors. You talked about this Walter guy saying, well, his mission wasn't completed. It wasn't even completed with the one person, because he killed not a black Christian pastor, he killed the wife of a black Christian pastor. So if
he said he wasn't there, but
well, if he wasn't there, then you just come back, but you don't kill someone else. if you got this from the Most High. And that's why I said these things, many people have visions that they claim they got from the Most High, but these are not visions at all. And the teacher Hananiah I heard about would have never told this man to go kill someone. If he really believed that, he would have killed them himself. But he didn't believe this. And the one that was closest to him surely didn't believe it and never taught it and never inspired us to do it. And so we're still teaching to this day. And he taught, Moreh IshiYAH Will taught over 45 years before his death. And we're continuing on those same teachings that he taught, and that is to keep the laws, the commandments, statutes, and judgments of the Most High. And this is why you don't see us on streets hollering at people, screaming at people, saying hateful things to people. No, we don't do any of these things because the Almighty don't tell us to do these things.
Right. And everyone, I want everyone to understand who's listening, by the questions I'm asking him and the discussion we're having, I am in no way, everyone please listen, insinuating the two gentlemen I'm talking to are, secretly, doing the same thing. That's not, I'm not saying, or that they're affiliated or that they're cool with that. I'm not saying anything like that. I am asking them questions. My questions probably are especially for, and I know they're not necessarily in the best position to answer. I also want to respect that about Hananiah, Israel. And the reasons why I say they're not in the best position is because they're sort of a generation removed. They're too young to really be able to say that. But they're saying what they know, and I want everyone to understand that I believe these are men of integrity who are saying what they know, and so there's not some between the lines type of thing going on here. And I appreciate the responses and I take them at face value. And I want everyone to understand that. With that being said, there's one other thing, byline, Dayton, Ohio, July 7th from New York Times. I didn't realize I had this one too. It's under the title, Death List Found in Chenault's Room. And I don't know if you guys have heard this or revisited it, but there's one other thing that I thought was relevant that I caught while you were speaking, not from what you said, I'm saying, but as I was going through this to say, okay, what else might be of value? Because it actually gets into even a scriptural interpretation. This is under the section of the newspaper article called A Move to Dayton. And here's what it says. Then Mr. Chenault heard of Mr. Israel and met the old man in Cincinnati in March 1973. The student made several trips to see Mr. Israel, taking Mr. Brooks and other friends with him to discover the truth. So I thought that was significant. Often the session was taped so that Mr. Chenault could take the tapes back to Columbus, that's where I'm from, Columbus, Ohio, to study them. He made numerous phone calls to Mr. Israel to continue the discussions or ask for interpretations. The truth was a curious literal interpretation of the Old Testament. Whatever the problem, the answer was to be found in the Old Testament as interpreted by Mr. Israel. Now, of course, these are secular people trying to write about religious beliefs, so take that with a grain of salt, everybody, but let's continue on. Mr. Israel taught Mr. Chenault that the problems of blacks were traceable to false prophets, ministers, and civil rights leaders. For example, and this is the main part I wanted to look at, Mr. Israel counseled that black ministers had deceived black people, and Zechariah chapter 13 verse 3 declares, quote, "And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, Thou shalt not live." Mr. Israel told Mr. Chenault in a tape-recorded interpretation that the verse meant that when God established a black kingdom, some of the false prophets, the ministers, would sneak back in, but both father and mother, this is a quote now, but quote, both father and mother will be the first to kill them because they will not want to go through the hell we've been living in for 400 years, end quote. Mr. Chenault tested his new philosophy on friends and family. Now, this is important to understand that, just like you said, he had some issues. Most people rejected it, so I'm going to read this next line to be fair. Most of them rejected it outright and never took seriously his threats against black ministers, and even met resistance at his home there. But the reason I say that is, if this is true and accurate, they're saying it's recorded, you could see how there is some kind of a connection, because this is basically death to black pastors, death to civil rights leaders. In the case of King's father, he would sort of fit the bill of both, because we know that was the real target. Now, I understand you can only speak what you know. And I also understand, from my understanding, really, that he's not even properly understood as the founder of your particular congregation, because that was a gentleman who left. So I want everyone to understand that Hananiah is not even the founder of House of YisraEL that we're speaking on. Now, he seems to be the first, or one of the first people to bring this information to Cincinnati, but that doesn't mean he's the founder of this particular congregation. Again, I want everyone to be clear about that. So with that preface, last thing on the Chenault thing, and then maybe we can move on to some other stuff, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that, either of you gentlemen.
Yes, and the only thing I would like to say again, once again, I hadn't heard any tapes. I don't know of any tapes. I hear the New York Times quoting a lot of things, and we do have a lot of people in our Israelite community that came under the teachings of Hananiah, and so we're not oblivious to the things he taught and the people he taught and the inspiration that he had in our community. As I stated before, I don't know how much firsthand knowledge you can get other than being there from one of the teachers that taught with him. And all the people that I know in our community, not only they don't believe this thing that Chenault did came from Hananiah, but this is not how they describe Hananiah, Israel, period. And as I stated before, the one that I come up under, who founded the House of Israel, never, ever. He did and I wish I can find it, and it's a possibility that I made. It was on Reel to Reel, and our beloved teacher brought the Reel to Reel to class for us to hear the interview that he himself did on Reginald Chenault, because once that happened, many of the newspapers and news agencies came to Cincinnati, as you are stating, and that is true. They interviewed a lot of the people in the Israelite community, and one of those individuals was my teacher, and his interview was in 1972. I heard it personally. And if it's still available, I will be glad to share that with everybody. But nobody, everyone that I know that came under the spiritual teachings of Hananiah, none of these people did any of that or were violent or took that same position. So I don't know why this position was taken by Chenault and why he did. I only can go by what he said. And he said this was a vision from the Most High, and I believe that vision was false. And just real quick, Moreh IshiYAH wanted to share information on that.
Hallelujah. And you kind of brought out some of it in the article that you expounded on, but the Reginald Chenault, and this is where the article is a little inaccurate, Reginald Chenault and the others in Dayton, Ohio, then that's exactly where they were. They were in Dayton, Ohio, and they actually heard of Hananiah through tape recording. They only sat before Hananiah about twice.
Okay.
And so most of what they knew of Hananiah and his teachings came from tape recordings, and Reginald Chenault was the one giving most of the interpretation to himself and his followers. And he himself took it upon himself to go and do these things, and he referenced Hananiah, but he was not under Hananiah as Moreh IshiYAH was. He did not sit in his classes. He did not learn from him as our teacher Moreh IshiYAH did. And this is why Hananiah didn't support what he did, nor did IshiYAH, nor did anyone in Cincinnati at that time.
So I appreciate that, IshiYAH. So let me see if I got this right. You were saying, yes, he learned. We would probably disagree about this part, but I'll just put it this way. Learned he was an Israelite from Hananiah and was introduced to some basic things, but he's only meeting him a few times. He's got tape recordings. But then when he's playing these for people in Dayton, a city also which I'm somewhat familiar with, being a Columbus, Ohio boy, when he's playing these, he essentially is sort of acting as an interpreter for what Hananiah said, but he's not properly interpreting him. He's sort of interpreting to him his own version, which is not really what Hananiah is saying. And so then you sort of have a sort of an unreliable conduit by which this stuff is going, and it's Chenault, and his interpretations are they're askew of what Hananiah was saying. Because, and again, even reading the article, even if it was accurate, even from that, it didn't really say, just from that little article, Hananiah then was telling Chenault, do this now, or this is your responsibility. He, even from the article, I think you could say, well, this sounds like this is something that he was saying would be in some way a future thing, sort of with God as the judge or something. Because Christians, just so they're supposed to, and I do by God's grace, believe in the judgment of God as well. You know, I believe in God. So if a Christian is expounding, say, on the book of Revelation, I know you wouldn't hold that, but you wouldn't have to be Revelation. Revelation, of course, quotes the Old Testament a lot and says this is what God is going to do. That doesn't mean they're saying you go out now and destroy wicked or something like that. So I'm trying to meet you. Sorry if that was a little long, but it seems like that's what you're saying. And I think something that I'm getting from YisraEL, Moreh IshiYAH as well, is you didn't literally say this, but something along the lines of, well, let me ask that. I think you guys probably feel like because of this act back then that's not even directly connected to you, that Israelites in Cincinnati have been sort of besmirched, with something that's not really that shouldn't be laid at their feet. I think is something also that I'm getting as a general sense. Sorry if that's two questions, but response to that.
Yeah, and not that it should not be laid at our feet. We welcome the questions. It's just like the reason why we're talking today with you is because the video you said that the violence of the House of Israel Cincinnati. Now, if people run with that, that's what they will believe. That's what they will get out of it. That's what they would interpret. So we here just to make the record straight on that. And so just like the Chenault situation, we don't have to be first-hand accounters. All we have to do is look at the truth. And at the end of the day, many of the things that he learned, Hananiah might have talked about black pastors. We talk about Christianity and Islam and those that believe in these things. And at the end of the day, someone might interpret it. I have people that listen to me that never met me. They only heard of me and hear me through the internet. And so I don't know who they are. I don't know what state of condition their mind is in. And they may go and do a heinous act and then say, look, my teacher is Moreh IshiYAH YisraEL. And he teach this and he teach that. And then they call me and I let them know I don't even know this person. And I don't know how he interpret this thing, but he's attributing this violence to me. And I just don't think that's fair because this violence, he might have heard the teachings of Hananiah, but just to exclude his upbringing, his schooling, the community that he lived in, where we get a lot of our beliefs from. Before many of these people were Israelites or claimed to be Israelites, they were first Christians. So I don't know where they get these things at, but I see a lot of things is pointed towards Hananiah in the past, and I can believe it too if I didn't meet his other parishioners, if I didn't meet his other students. And when I met them, and some had firsthand account knowledge, no, they condemn this act greatly. And that's why you don't see these violent acts coming from the House of Israel of Cincinnati. I may add that really with any Israelite group, even though they call us hate groups and all kind of other names, you just don't see this violence there. You see individuals doing things, but you don't, violent things, but you don't, it can't be connected to our institution where we teach the Most High. Unlike other religions, you can connect it to that, but not these individuals.
Appreciate that. What about, so moving on past Chenault, what about in regards to YisraEL Israel? Now, you're saying it's alleged that he hasn't, it's not, hasn't went to trial yet. You're saying that, because that's a current case. And I obviously, this behavior, punching and choking a woman, shooting at her feet, allegedly shooting at two people a year prior. Obviously, that's not something that would be, good. It obviously violates the 10 Commandments, for example, violates love your neighbor, all kinds of things. Unless there's some kind of, this is self-defense, but the first one really doesn't sound like it. But if you can speak on that, so you did say, hey, he wasn't an active member, but we know who he is, or he came here. I guess he's close. I think he's close to where you're at, Walnut Hills. But what about that? What would you want people to know about the YisraEL Israel situation? I know it's sensitive because it's kind of current, so I don't want to get you to say anything you don't want to say, if you know what I mean. But what you feel comfortable saying? Oh
yeah, we won't hide anything. And this is one of our brothers. And the only reason I use the word allege, because in this country, you innocent until proven guilty. So I just said alleged, and it just to give him a benefit of doubt until all the facts come out. Of course, we don't support any of the things that is alleged. He's not from Cincinnati. He's not from Walnut Hills. He's actually from Columbus, Ohio. And
really?
That is correct. One of your brothers.
It's from my area.
Yes, one of your brothers.
I wonder where he went to high school. In all seriousness, I wonder where he went to high school at. I wonder if we went to the same high school. If he's from Southfield, then we went to the same high school, Marion Franklin. I'm just curious where I wonder. Anyways.
And I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you this about our brother, is that he's from Columbus. His mother still resides in Columbus. He learned about the House of Israel first in college at Central State University. He also
he was at Central State.
Yes, and he also was at Clark Atlanta University. So he went to both schools, colleges. And I don't know where the violence turned from or turned to. However, he, as I stated before, was not an active member of our class for years, even though he's still our brother, but he just hadn't been an active member of our congregation. And but I just can say alleged with him at this time until all the facts come out. But we don't support choking no women, doing anything to women, killing anybody, unless it's for self-defense. But no, we don't support any of those things. Of course, my brother, he know we don't support any of those things. And these things should never have been attributed to the House of Israel Cincinnati. And that's the only point that we wanted to make, not even about our brother YisraEL Israel, but it was attributed to the House of Israel as if we inspired him to do something. And this violence came as a result of what we teach. And that's just far from the truth. We got a commandment in the 10 Commandments that says, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. We're your neighbor. And I'm saying we should have been given the benefit of doubt call. Look, I hear this and I hear that. Is this come from you all? And we would have told you no. And we still could have talked about it. But even though it was alleged that it came from the house of Israel in Cincinnati, this is totally not the truth at all, not even close. Not the Shiloh as well as YisraEL Israel. And we condemn all that. And but I'm short of condemning my brother until all the facts come out.
I respect that. That makes sense. Last case that I brought up was the situation with the 5-year-old. Do you remember? Because I also spoke about that as well.
That is correct. And I heard about this case, and some of the Israelites in our community shared with me that they were even at the trial. And so of this particular situation and case, I don't know a lot about it, but I do know this. That case, as well as the other cases, it was not born out of what we teach here at the House of Israel, not today or yesterday. It's just not born out of our teachings at all. We condemn these things. If anybody in our congregation or in the past congregation did these things, they would no longer be a part of our congregation, let alone be in criminal in the courts. They wouldn't be a part of our...
But those were students of Hananiah Israel, though. Michael Austin and Janet Arrington, they were students of Hananiah.
Yes, that's a possibility. It's just like if you had a church and you had people in your church committing crimes or doing things, that am I to attribute that to you in your teachings and your belief? Just because somebody choked their wife or had an abusive relationship or maybe stole for some reason or maybe did other things, these are things that we teach against. So we don't support these things at all. And I can't see Hananiah supporting these things whatsoever. He taught against these things. I don't know who. I don't know.
That was what the Children of Israel group. Was what the group was called, Children of Israel. That I guess it says in this thesis, the master's thesis, that he was the local leader of at the time.
That is correct. And let's talk about this thesis for a second. It was by a woman named Sable Willis, and this woman is a Israelite. She's a friend of ours. We are the ones that inspired her to do the thesis. And she did it with our support. We was the first ones that she interviewed to do her thesis. As a matter of fact, she didn't even know about a lot of these things, and we shared them with her. And so that she can have a good round view of what she was writing about and how Cincinnati was started. And when you read the whole thesis, you will learn that we're not a violent group at all. We're not a hate group at all, which the government says. We none of the things that people allege to say about the House of Israel. And she had problems writing this thesis. She was shut down many times, but she persevered and she was able to publish it. But no, this came as a result of the House of Israel. We helped her, we provided the information to her, and she's an Israelite, and she's a friend of ours. And she was not happy about seeing the video either. And I'll make sure you get her information. You can talk to her directly. And so she personally pointed out these cases, not to show that we're violent or the teachings are violent, but just an overall view of the things that has happened historically in Cincinnati. But we're the ones who helped her with that.
You are quoted, of course, in the thesis.
Yes, I was interviewed. Yes, I was interviewed, and my other teachers was interviewed. I gave her many other Israelites that she could have interviewed, and I'm sure she did. And we provided various literature and articles and things that will help her in her thesis.
And then you as well, Moreh IshiYAH, you were quoted as well from one of your songs, in a song entitled Black Supremacist Volume 2, which says, it's death to Babylon, death to Lucifer, death to America, yeah, death to the white man, death to the evil man, death to the oppressive man. Always on my neck, you always feed me with disrespect, so it's time for revolution, yeah. We've been caught in destitution, yeah, yeah. Yah, about to give us retribution, yeah. Vengeance he will avenge. Not I, son, I don't seek revenge, but I will repent for the sins I have committed, in a song called Death to Babylon.
Yes, I made that.
So you could, I think if you see that in connection with some of the stuff we're discussing, I mean, it's, I don't know. It's not, I feel like, you know, it's not like I'm a crazy person saying, well, you could say there's some disturbing stuff in here. I mean, death to the white man, death to America, death, you know, I'm just saying.
Well, yeah, I said all those things because America has been slaughtering black people for 400 years.
So when you say death to the white man, explain, because earlier he read from Isaiah 56, but your song says death to the white man.
Well, we can also read from various scriptures where the Creator said he's going to end all nations. He said in the book of Zephaniah, the 3rd chapter, the 8th verse, he said his indignation is to gather all nations, and he will destroy them all. He said,
but you didn't say death to the black man.
No,
you didn't say death to the
brown
man.
The children of Israel are a black nation, and he said he's not going to destroy the children of Israel. But he is going to destroy all black folks. Is going to destroy.
You don't think all black folks are Israelites, though, right?
No, all black folks are not Israelites. But he
right.
is
So you could have said hypothetically death to the black man, I guess, right?
I could have, but I did not. I said what
so
I said.
What do you mean by that?
I'm saying the Creator said he will destroy all the nations that have put their hands on us. And my lyrical interpretation was exactly that, because this is the word of the Most High. He will destroy all these nations, which is why you also quoted me saying that the Creator will do this. So
right.
he's
and
going to kill all the wicked. So he's going to kill all the wicked people. Yes.
But you didn't mention nations. You mentioned nation. And you didn't mention people groups. You mentioned one people group. Yes, I did. And the song is titled Black Supremacist.
Yes, it is.
So that's work you would still affirm. You would still affirm that work. Because this seems out of step with a lot of the rest of the interview.
I made the music, if that's what you're asking.
No, I know you made it, but you're saying you still stand by this 100%?
Yeah, and let me comment on that as well. The only people that has oppressed us here in America is white people, not black people at all. And so in his young life, these are things that they spoke about, the oppressor that's oppressing us. Now, if it had been a bunch of black people oppressing us, he probably would have sung about them, but it was not. All the discrimination, the exploitation, the racism, that came from our white oppressors, not from black oppressors. Now, if we were in another country, he may be singing about something different, but that don't mean that white people can't be saved. It don't mean white people was not part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And so black supremacy is just a volume of work that my brother did in detailing who the oppressor really is. And we're not oppressed by black people. Technically speaking, we are, but not as institutions. And so he don't have to apologize for telling the truth. But we also must tell the truth that white people can be saved, and other people can be saved, and other people who the Creator seemed bless Israel will be blessed. And so if you listen to a song and it seems sketchy, and not listen to our teachings every Sabbath, and we teach every day, not just every day, but every Sabbath, then you would have got a greater, better view of Moreh IshiYAH. And so it is true that these things are said, and I'm just explaining why they are said. Now, if you can tell us another oppressor here in America, then maybe it's the Hispanics. Are they the oppressor?
Well, it's an interesting thing to only look at a certain time of history, right? And it's also an interesting thing to have one group of people like that. Meaning you could, when you look throughout history, if you would say, hey, I'm an Israelite, there's actual Babylonians, actual Assyrians, right? Actual Egyptians. And then if you believe the transatlantic slave trade is a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28:68, there'd be actual, I guess you would say, Hamites. There would be a problem here. Actual Ishmaelites, it would be a problem here.
Yeah, but they're not. Yes, but they're not oppressing us today. None of the groups
Ishmaelites still have black slaves. I don't know if you consider those people Israelites, but they still have black slaves to this day. Like literal slaves.
No, I totally agree. But somewhere else, not here in America. Not here in America. And so he's just speaking of what's going on here in our lives. It's hard for us to speak about other places, even though we teach exactly what you're saying, that our people are scattered all over the earth and being oppressed, exploited all over the world. But it's very difficult. Like, for instance, when we talk about those who call the Falashas, Ethiopian Israelites. Many of them are Beta Israel. Many of them talk about their oppression, not in Ethiopia. They talk about their oppression in Israel, in the country of Israel. And so they have a view that's different than us. When they come to America and other groups come to America, they don't have the same view that we have who live as a result of us living here all our life. And we look to our daddies and mothers and our grandparents and our great-great-grandparents, and they all saying the same thing. The only difference between our grandparents and our ancestry and IshiYAH is that IshiYAH is singing about it. But this is something we all talk about, and that's the oppression and the exploitation and the discrimination against our people. If it was Chinese people, we will be saying that. Man. Say that again.
You would agree with the line "Death to the white man"?
Well, I don't know how. I think he probably was trying to rhyme. I don't know how he make his.
Death to Babylon,
I don't know.
Death to Lucifer.
But I do believe
death to America, death to the white man, death to the evil man, death to the oppressive man.
I believe that is death to anyone that's against.
I hear you, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that.
No, and I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you that it probably don't say that at all. And I'm saying, and see, this is what I'm saying. Just like we came on the program to talk about the violence of the house of Israel, and I ain't seen one violent thing yet. In other words, all the violence that's been alleged don't have nothing to do with the house of Israel. And I'm saying, so here it is.
Elijah did go there.
Say that again.
I'm not saying you taught that, but Elijah did go there.
Yes, but I'm saying violent people went to Christian churches. That don't mean Christian churches is teaching violence.
Well, I'm sure. I know there's some that have.
Not some, not some. And we can detail many. But the point is, the song that he's singing, and I'm trying to make this point that you hear some lyrics. It's just like Dave Chappelle. He had a comedy special, and he talk about transgenders and so forth and so on. And I hear what he say. And he said they misunderstanding what he's saying. They missing his point. And I'm saying you're missing the point about the lyric death to the white man. Because we just showed you in the scriptures where a white man and any other people altogether, they can be saved. So obviously, he wasn't talking about all white people. Now, if a white person called us today, which they do, and they call Moreh IshiYAH and ask him the same question, and they do, that you're asking us, this will be his explanation. Yes, I did say that. And that was a lyric because that's who is oppressing us. But I'm not saying that all white people gonna die, no white person can be saved, and we don't have that ideology, even though he said that as a lyric, that death to the white man.
And you're focusing on death to the white man, but the song is explicitly speaking about those that oppress us. That's why it was evil, the oppressor, America, Babylon. And the people that propagate the oppression happen to be Caucasian. So I could not leave that out, and I had to express that. Just like
you had to include
just
that.
like
So
the indigenous people, just like the indigenous people, just like the indigenous people of this land want the white people to go home, to want them to go back to Europe. Many of the indigenous people of this land who are now categorized as Hispanic want the Europeans to go home, and they don't like them either. The Europeans were the ones that propagated all this oppression. So we can't just ignore that this is what they did. And we have trauma and oppression from it. So it's just an expression. But we don't see the Christian religion. We're not doing what the Christianity religion, Ku Klux Klan is Christians. Dylan Roof, who shot up 9 people in the church, grew up in a Christian church. And many of the destructive acts of violence that are done to whites, to Arabs, to Chinese, and to blacks in America are done by white Christians, by Christians, period. And
Christians don't kill other Christians, IshiYAH. And Dylan Roof explicitly said he was not a Christian.
Christians kill other Christians every day.
Raised, but Dylan Roof explicitly said he was not a Christian.
I said he grew up in a Christian church. And I'm saying Christians...
Maybe, but almost everyone in the South did.
Yes, and Christians kill Christians every day, is what I'm saying. There's more violence amongst the Christians against Christians, whether they're black or white, and this is what goes on in this country. And we just want to focus that this black man who made an album called Black Supremacist, and we could talk about that another day, why it's even called that. But
why is it called that?
Because the creator's black, and he's the supreme being. Mm-hmm. Yahweh is king, and he's black, and that's why it's called Black Supremacist. But just because a black man says this, now we are going to talk about violence, and we're not the ones propagating
saying death
this
to the
violence.
white man is violent. IshiYAH, you gotta, no matter what you say, saying death to the white man is a violent statement. When you say death to the evil man, death to the oppressive man, notice you're focusing on immoral actions. That makes sense. That's an Old Testament reality. Death to the white man is focusing on an ethnic group.
Yes.
That's not it's not an inherently sinful thing in and of itself to be white. It is a sinful thing to be evil and oppressive. So you have a mixing and matching of categories there. And that's why it's problematic. So it's also no matter what anyone has done, it doesn't excuse that kind of lyric.
In other words, you're saying that his lyrics, in particularly, that lyric is violent.
Death to the white man is a statement of violence. Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
So if he had said death to the wicked, death to the evil, that would have been more acceptable to you.
Well, that'd be judgment for wickedness. Unless you believe white is a category of wickedness, then it doesn't match saying evil and oppressive, because we know God judges and he's right to judge wickedness and oppression. We agree with that. But you throwing in a non-inherently wicked category. Well, you threw in something that's an ethnicity.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Well, many white people die as a result of their sin against.
The road to hell is broad.
I understand that, but I'm asking you. Yeah,
Yes.
I understand that, but I'm asking you specifically about white people, and I'm asking you, will many white people die as a result of their sin towards blacks?
like everyone else, but
not
not
because
of their ethnicity. That's the problem, though.
You say what? Not because of their what?
Not because of their ethnicity, but because of their wickedness. Just like the same reason that a Japanese man will die for his sin.
Yeah, and that's why
all have sinned and come short of the glory of God.
Yeah, and that's why he's here to explain the lyric. Because when he say death to the white man, he's not talking about those who bless Israel, those who helped our people in a time of slavery, hid them in their houses, hid them in their basements, hid them in other places, helped them escape the South. He's not talking about.
Yeah, that even happened in Cincinnati. It was a key place.
Absolutely.
Underground Railroad.
Absolutely. And so, in other words, see, you can be confused about the lyric and want more understanding.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm saying the average person.
I'm not really confused about the lyric.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty obvious what it's saying.
You obviously are confused about the lyric because we showed you how white people can be saved, but you're still emphasizing.
That's a contradiction in what's going on here.
Well, no,
Moreh IshiYAH would say he believes that, but then he'll say something like that. I'm saying there's a contradiction there.
Well, your whole video was a contradiction to us. We don't even teach violence. We don't teach violence at all. But I'm saying your video was about the violence in the house of Israel, and there's no violence in the house of Israel. That was a total.
I don't remember. I never said that. What did I say exactly? Because I talked about the violence of Hananiah Israel and his students.
No. All you got to do is look at the title, and you will see.
Wait. Hold on. Let me. I'm gonna look at the title right now.
Yeah.
Because I never said the violence in the house of Israel.
No. Yeah.
The title of the video is.
It's the house of Israel of Cincinnati, and read that. I can't see it. Read that.
OT only Hebrew Israelite punches, chokes woman, shoots at three.
No, we just talking about the video title.
Says House of Israel, Cincinnati.
You're talking about the cover image? Saturday, October 2nd. I'm looking at 17 p.m. in the Pacific time. And you talking about the cover image?
Yes.
All right, let's bring up the cover image here. You're saying it says the violence in the house of Israel?
House of Israel of Cincinnati, a violent past and present.
Hello?
I'm trying to see what you're saying. So the cover image I have says Hebrew Israelite chokes woman and shoots at three people. That's the cover image.
No, that's just
San Miguel. Maybe this is San Miguel's.
Oh, you're talking about what I don't know what he titled it.
Yeah,
is that what he put?
He titled it, but in the video, you're the one interviewing him, and you open up the video talking about the House of Israel, Cincinnati, is where Elijah went to, and this is the violence that's going on from their class, from their teachings.
No.
Well,
this is what
I
you said
didn't.
in the
Okay, so now I understand. Just so you know that the video, I did it on Facebook. I didn't realize he titled it that. Later on, he put it on his channel. And if you're saying that's what he put, then okay, that's what he put.
Regardless,
that's not
he
my
titled
title.
it that. You also spoke about the violence was coming from the House of Israel, Cincinnati.
Well, he went there and he even taught. But I'm not saying that you taught him how to do that. I never said, for example, Moreh IshiYAH taught him to do that or anything like that. I never said anything like that.
No, and listen,
he did go there And I did bring up other cases related to Hananiah.
That's
I see what you're
correct.
saying, but that's not my title. I didn't know he titled it that. I didn't know he titled it that.
And
But,
that's good. And that's good. And we don't know who titled it. All we know is this went out to thousands of
It's
people.
not on my channel. That's not my
Right,
channel, so I can't
right.
title it.
Yeah, yeah. It went
But
out
I hear
to-
what you're saying. That's
yeah.
not
And so
what
my
I
own-
said.
But my only point to bringing that up, because
Yeah.
this is how you got our attention, that we were
Right.
under the impression that you and others believe that the House of Israel Cincinnati not only had a violent past, but they have a violent present. And so we came to respond to that. And so now we're responding to that. And now we're having a good dialogue that no, this you can't attach this to the House of Israel Cincinnati. Likewise, with the lyric and the song, this is in the same video. You point out again violent things that's coming from the House of Israel of Cincinnati. And
Well,
what
this is
we're
in the thesis. I mean, his line. I'm
Yeah,
not saying
I know that.
you taught that. All I'm saying is when you got one guy, Elijah, choking and punching a woman, you're saying allegedly, shooting at her feet, and then apparently a year later, and then it's like, and then you have your lyrics, "Death to the white man." I'm just saying,
But
it's not like there's nothing there to talk about. There's something there to talk about.
But he wasn't talking. His violent acts wasn't against oppressors. So
I don't know who it was.
So to
I don't know who it was
to
against.
correlate
I don't know
his
who it was
violent
against.
acts with a song that's talking about oppression.
You know who the woman was?
I'm saying I know his violent acts wasn't against oppressors.
What if it was a white woman?
I know his violent acts wasn't against oppressors. His alleged violent acts, anyway, were not against oppressors. So you can't couple my lyrics with his violent acts, alleged violent acts.
Yeah, in
You're
other
saying
words,
it
it's saying, yeah, in other
You're saying
words,
it wasn't a white. You're saying it wasn't a white woman though.
I'm saying my lyrics.
well, we
did not-
answered the question. It wasn't a white woman. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, it wasn't a white woman. It wasn't white people. Yeah.
Okay.
That was following his
right.
song and then killing white folks. No, it wasn't like that at all. We have many white listeners and they hear his songs. They actually love his songs, actually. And
Yeah,
so,
you got
but
white
I
folks
understand,
walking up to
I
white
do
supremacists.
understand, and just in all honesty, I understand why you will have an issue, or anyone will have an issue with that lyric. We're not here to say nobody should have a problem with that lyric or anything like that at all. We're not saying that at all. There's many lyrics and statements that we might make that may rattle someone. But what we're saying, just like the video and the headline of the video, the House of Israel of Cincinnati, the violence there in past and present, we're saying just like that lyric, that can be explained, that can be talked about, whether you agree with it or not. That still can be talked about because we're not talking about the death. Well, I'm not talking about it at all. This is what he was singing, and he's not saying the death to all white people or anything like that. This is something that we just don't teach. And so I just, I don't think we can be confused about that. And I'm saying the person who put that in her thesis, it was good that she put it in her thesis because we wanted everyone to just see the history. And so she had a section of her thesis talking about these things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's all. And we love the work that she did.
All right. I appreciate that. Last question is in relation to one other thing I brought up. Because we have the case where it appears two of his students did beat a 5-year-old child to death. That was at the Children of Israel, but that was Hananiah Israel students. the last situation that I brought up was with David Hill, where he apparently was also affiliated with Hananiah Israel, and he beat one of his House of Israel members to death. Ended up being sentenced 15 years in prison for manslaughter for that. Do you know anything about the David Hill situation? Because it's yet another person associated with Hananiah. It's just hits a lot around one guy between Chenault, the two folks who beat their child, Hill. It's just a lot around one guy, you know?
Well, it may seem like a lot to you, but at the end of the day, we don't do this. This is probably work that you do. And I don't know if you're doing any work on Christian organizations or Christian pastors to see how many people in their congregation commit crimes like this against their wives, against their children, and against some of their own parishioners or other brothers or other races. I don't know if this the foundation of your work, but it seemed like the foundation of your work is to point out every negative thing you can find about an Israelite. And that's what it seems to us. And we looked at a lot of your videos, and a lot of the videos seem to be talking about Israelites rather than Christians who commit more violent acts than the Israelites that you point out. And so I'm just trying to figure out where is the consistency. It seems like a false balance that you want to say Israel is violence, and three individuals, three different families, three occasions that came from Hananiah Israel, they beat their kids. One killed a wife of a pastor. Another one did this. But I don't hear the same vigilance against these Christian pastors that have way more followers than a Hananiah Israel committing violence. And so maybe you can answer that for us. And as far as this last case, as I stated before, we heard about these cases. And once again, as I stated, that everything violent that is happening in our community, as far as the Israelite community, we can see it's being pointed out. Look, he beat his kids. Look, he killed somebody. Well, there's killings happening every day in Cincinnati. And what church do you think they come from? What organization do they believe in? What affiliation do they have? And surely they belong to something and somebody, and killings happening every day in Cincinnati, especially the black community. And none of these people come from the House of Israel of Cincinnati. So where are they coming from? What do they believe in? It might be a gang. It might be something else, but it could be a Christian church. And I don't see these things being pointed out. But
Well,
they believe in something. At the end,
Right.
I see a lot of them saying, "Thank you, JESUS," and so a lot of them, and their parents coming in church praying for them, and they call themselves Christians, and that's happening way more than an Israelite congregation. We just don't have that many followers to have the same violent and profound negative effect on our communities like the Christian church does. And that's just a fact.
Do you know anything though about the David Hill
Other
situation
than
at all?
other than what I heard and other than what I pointed out. But you seem to only know surface things. It's just being pointed right towards Hananiah, as if, man, look at these people coming out of this. And I don't attribute none of these things to Hananiah, or less, because it's easy for me to attribute things to him, unless his other students and parishioners had told me something else. And so that's what I have. I have other people who told me and shared with me that live in our community today. Even my teacher, who's passed now, who passed in 2003, they all have a different outlook, a different ideology, and mission and belief of Hananiah than what's being reported.
Well, so I understand that Hananiah Israel is not the founder of the House of Israel, Cincinnati, but focusing on him, you got Chenault. Well, we can't really see this paper I wrote on. Chenault, Austin, Arlington, Hill, and if you track it down, Elijah. That's all I'm saying there. But I also understand he's not the founder of your community. So,
and Elijah was never under Hananiah. He was under the House of Israel, Cincinnati. So you really only have these two. And as I stated before, these
it's still four.
Yes,
I know he was under one of the students. I'm just saying it's like a whole thing. And then you got, of course, IshiYAH saying death to the white man.
Yeah, he said that. That is the truth. He said that.
Well, in regards to black supremacists, would you say, IshiYAH, that you are also a black supremacist?
No, I'm not a black supremacist. As I said, the title was to show that the Creator is black and he is the supreme being.
So you're a God supremacist.
I'm a Hebrew Israelite and a servant of Yahweh.
I know what I'm saying. If you're saying what you're actually saying is God is supreme.
Yeah, Yah is supreme.
Then you're saying that. You're not saying you're a black supremacist.
No, I'm not a black supremacist.
Okay. But it's Black Supremacist Volume 1 and 2.
Yes.
But you're saying that just means God supreme. That's all that means.
That's what it means.
All right, I appreciate that. Is there anything else you guys feel like, well, we need to make sure we say this, or here's a good thing, here's a bad thing? Anything else you guys feel like that is important to come out? I appreciate you coming on. I mean, I know it's late there, and I'm just trying to think of a way to give you the last word. I don't know what else to say, though. Other than that.
No, that's okay. No, that's good. We appreciate that. Again, you gave us the opportunity to come on your show to set the record straight. Of course, we believe that, which we already knew before we even came on the program, that this violence of the past, violence present, that's with individuals that was part of our community, had no bearing on the House of Israel of Cincinnati, period. Just like the many killings that's happened in Cincinnati and Chicago and all over the country, we don't attribute those violent acts that's happening to their churches unless we can prove otherwise. And I'm saying that hadn't been proven today. And we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to come on and talk about these things as well as our practice and belief. Here in Cincinnati, Ohio, we have a very large and strong Israelite community. Even with the various different types of congregations here in Cincinnati, we're still a close-knit, strong congregation. And the reason why is because many of us came from under just a couple leaders. One in particular, Moreh IshiYAH Israel, and he came out of the teachings of Hananiah Israel. And these congregations that was formed as a result of these two men, none are violent. They all teach about the Most High, and they all are strong and, for the most part, good citizens in America. We all believe in the laws, commandments, statutes, and judgments of the Most High. And not only we believe that, we live that, in spite of the few in our community that might have went astray. And some have went astray, more that you don't even know and not even written about. And so, but this is no different from any other community and organization. And so, but it wasn't because of the House of Israel of Cincinnati. We love our heritage. We love our community. We have a strong community, and we invite you to visit our community, even though you might be a Christian. We still invite you.
No, I appreciate that. In all seriousness, if you know the gentleman from House of Israel, I know you guys wouldn't agree on everything, but you agree on some things. When I say House of Israel, I'm talking about out of Riverdale, out of Chicago. They invited me, and I went, and I tried to be very respectful. I didn't do any like secret recording or nothing. I just came in like a normal person with my Bible and spent time with them and listened. I took notes. I wrote down notes. And then at the end, we talked and had a discussion. And even today, you can find video after video where I'll disagree with the House of Israel on key matters. I don't act like I don't disagree. I don't. That's not a thing I'm hiding. But I'll constantly speak about how kind they were and how respectful they have been multiple times when I visited them. Because I also got to go to the Riverdale campus, and so again, I was respectful. I didn't do any kind of secret thing. If I took a picture, I'd say, "May I take a picture?" And we hung out, and it was good. And we talked theology. We chopped it up. Did not agree. We agreed on some things. And I think it was a good thing where I'm going to say, disagree, but you can't question their character. You can't question their kindness. I can't question their generosity. Yeah. And I'll say that again and again and again. So here's what I'm saying. I go to Columbus a decent amount. I got a lot of family there, a little bit of folks in Cincinnati. If you were serious, I'd be willing, if you were down, to do the same thing. Come and be normal, respectful, chill, and know on a personal level, because I do think there's going to be Hebrews-lites and there's going to be Christians, and it's good if we can learn how to have respectful disagreements, because we're not going to agree on everything, but learn how to do it in a way that's okay. Let's talk about it, but nobody needs to act crazy. Nobody needs to, you know what I mean? Because you've seen how things can be sometimes. Oh,
absolutely. I've been part of it. Yes, so I know.
Things can.
And I said it, and I said what I said because I was serious. We would love to have you visit us, and we can talk a little bit more, and you can sit into our classes.
All right. Well, I'll let you know the next time I'm coming through that I know about. I was just there about a month ago, and to me, Cincinnati is one of the most beautiful cities. I know it's got, like a lot of cities in America, issues in the past that are still with us. I'm not saying everything's gone away. I'm saying past and present. But man, I think that city is so beautiful, and I love the people. I love the downtown area. There's a lot to love about Cincinnati. I even like the way you guys root for your sport teams. You're very loyal, not fair weather people. I respect that, because they don't always win, but a lot of really loyal people there. And I like that. I like that loyalty. And so I appreciate a lot. I like the food in Cincinnati too. I love the Ohio River, that beautiful bridge you can go over. It's just a lot there. So I'll love to come and join and be with you guys.
Well, sometime. Hallelujah. Praise the mighty Yah. And we love to have you. And you have our information. If you don't, Moreh IshiYAH will make sure you have everything. And we look forward to seeing you. And we will let all our other parts of our community know. And even though they're not with us here every week, we in contact with each other all the time. And so they are listening to our program today, and they listening to you as well as me, as well as Moreh IshiYAH, and they look forward to having you, and they can talk with you themselves.
Appreciate that. IshiYAH or IshiYAH, would you want to give any final, say people want to find out more about your community or subscribe or whatever they want to do? Because I'm all about people have information, any kind of final thing you want to, so people can say, check us out here, check us out there.
Yes, you can all check us out on youtube.com/HOY Cincinnati. Also, facebook.com/HOY Cincy. Our website is worldgatheringyisrael.org. And we broadcast every day on youtube.com/HOY Cincinnati, beginning in the morning. And we have our teaching Nothing But the Truth at 7 o'clock from Monday through Friday, and our Shabbat services on Saturday starting at 12 to sundown. That's youtube.com/HOY Cincinnati. Praise the mighty Yah. Hallelujah.
Thank you. I hope you have a blessed night. I know it's late out there. I apologize for that, but thank you. And we got each other's email.
Thank you, and shalom.
All right, y'all, I'm going to hit the out button. That is the end of the show. I thank these gentlemen for coming on, and I appreciate their time. And I'm not going to be going live tomorrow. I'm not sure about Thursday yet. I'm still working out some things, but maybe this weekend. I will be teaching on Psalm 10, though, tomorrow, and some of you know how to catch that. If not, hit me up, and I'll tell you where you can find that, but it won't be on my channel. So with that, I'm going to hit the outro button, and I hope those gentlemen have a good night and actually get some rest. Peace out.